Every year, as the sun baked the lawns of our quiet Columbus suburb and the air thickened with the scent of grilled meats and cut grass, our family barbecue reminded me just how easy it was to disappear, even among my own kin. Today was no different. The Bennett backyard, so carefully manicured by my father, was a stage set for old traditions, picnic tables groaning with covered dishes, laughter punctuated by the hiss of a grill, and the familiar cadence of voices that always seemed to talk over, but never to, me. Last summer, Tracy had been the star, coming home with her latest promotion at Sterling Group. Everyone buzzed around her as if she'd brought home a Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, my pasta salad had wilted in the sun, barely touched except by the wasps. This year, as I pulled into the driveway with my bowl, elbows out, sunglasses on, I reminded myself not to take it personally. Some things, like family pecking orders and Ohio humidity, never really changed. I parked beneath the old maple tree, breathing in the rich scent of summer. My outfit was carefully chosen, a simple blue sundress, practical sandals. Nothing that would invite comments about wasting money or trying too hard. I stepped into the swirl of family, cousins tossing cornhole bags, Aunt Susan balancing a tray of deviled eggs, Dad fiddling with the propane tank. Mom, her hair perfectly set, spotted me first. "Emily, you made it," she called, but her attention had already shifted to Tracy, who was launching into a story about her latest project. At Sterling, we're rolling out a new client portfolio. I was put in charge because, well, I guess they trust me to handle the big accounts. Her voice rang out, just loud enough for all the relatives to hear. I deposited my famous pasta salad, spirals, olives, a hint of lemon, on the buffet, between Aunt Susan's potato bake and a mysterious casserole. Someone had labeled it Emily's pasta salad, but the handwriting wasn't mine. It was a small gesture, but at least someone had thought to name it. As I made my way toward the drink cooler, Tom, Tracy's husband, intercepted me with a grin. "Hey Em, maybe one day you'll get a real office like Tracy. Until then, at least you have your pasta salad fame." He winked. I managed a laugh, letting it wash over me. "Yeah, maybe one day," I replied, stirring the ice and searching for a cold soda. The afternoon unfolded in scenes I could have predicted. Tracy's stories were met with nods and wows from Dad, who seemed to measure our worth in bullet points and LinkedIn updates. Mom gushed over Tracy's latest achievements, telling anyone who would listen about her daughter's big city clients and impressive bonuses. Nobody asked about my work, or if they did, the questions felt loaded. "Still at that office? You know, you could always take a few classes. Maybe then you'd move up." I smiled, sidestepped, and asked about their gardens or vacations instead. I watched from the edges, sipping my soda, feeling the comfort and sting of being both present and overlooked. "You're just so quiet, Emily," Mom said, squeezing my shoulder as she breezed by, her eyes already searching for Tracy. "Don't you want more out of life?" The words landed softly, not cruel but cutting, the way water shapes stone. Cousins drifted in and out, kids running between legs, Uncle Frank balancing his paper plate and launching into a story about his latest golf score. I nodded along, finding warmth in the small details, the scent of baked beans, the shimmer of lemonade in a mason jar, Tracy's laughter bouncing over the fence. The familiar rhythm almost lulled me into forgetting how invisible I sometimes felt, until another offhand comment pulled me back. Near the grill, I overheard Tracy confiding in Aunt Susan, her tone breezy but pointed. "Emily's always been happy to play it safe. She never wanted the big risks. Guess some people just find their lane and stick to it." The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were so old and often repeated. I wondered, just for a moment, what would happen if I said what I really thought. If I reminded them that playing it safe is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. but I held my tongue. There are moments in life when silence feels like self-defense. And in families, sometimes you keep the peace not because you're weak, but because you know which battles aren't worth fighting. As the sun slid lower and the yard filled with shadows, I slipped away from the crowd. The laughter faded, replaced by the chirr of cicadas and the distant hum of a neighbor's mower. My phone buzzed in my hand, a message lighting up the screen. Urgent, call me. R. Hayes. I looked back at my family, my parents still leaning in to hear Tracy's every word, Aunt Susan replenishing the punch bowl, Tom nudging the last hamburger onto the grill. I inhaled the mix of charcoal, cut grass, and something bittersweet. In that moment, I realized families have their own silent hierarchies, visible only if you know where to look. Sometimes, the things left unsaid are heavier than the words themselves. With a sigh, I stepped away, feeling the weight of both belonging and distance. I read the message again. My heart fluttered with something that felt a lot like hope, or maybe just the promise that change was finally at my door. There was a time I thought it was easier to stay unseen than to fight for attention I never really wanted. After the barbecue, with its sticky heat and stinging reminders of where I ranked, my small apartment was a welcome retreat. The place felt cooler than the yard full of laughter, quieter than my mother's fretting or Tracy's stories. Sometimes, I thought I'd chosen this apartment for its very anonymity, a modest third-floor walk-up, one bedroom, tidy living room, and a kitchen with exactly 3 mugs and no wine glasses. I flicked on the lamp by the couch, setting my purse and the half-empty bowl of pasta salad on the counter. The city lights sparkled in the distance, Columbus skyline like a far-off constellation. I didn't bother with music or TV. Instead, I stood by the window, tracing the faint outline of the downtown buildings. The silence was a balm, but tonight it was tinged with something restless, as if the echoes of Tracy's words, happy to play it safe, had followed me home. My phone vibrated again. Urgent, call me. R. Hayes. The name alone made my chest tighten. Robert Hayes, CEO in the public's eyes, but only the face of Sterling Group. In truth, I was the one pulling the strings, the real owner, the one who signed his paychecks and everyone else's. The secrecy of it was both power and burden. I called him back, bracing myself for the kind of conversation I usually kept at arm's length. Robert answered on the first ring, his voice low and direct. Emily. I'm glad you called. Sorry, it took a minute. Family event, I replied, lowering myself onto the couch, knees pulled close. I won't keep you. I just need your eyes on the Westbrook proposal tonight. There's some pushback from the board, and a couple of journalists have started asking about Sterling's ownership structure. I closed my eyes for a moment. It's that season, isn't it? I tried to sound light, but the dread simmered underneath. Robert paused, then spoke more gently. Look, I know your preference for privacy. But things are shifting. We're growing, and people are paying attention. The board wants to meet the real decision maker. It's getting harder to explain your absence. I looked around my apartment, simple, uncluttered, quiet. The rent was less than what I could afford, but comfort had never been the point. There were no signs of wealth, no designer furniture, just a sturdy thrift store table and a faded blue couch. On the bookshelf sat my MBA diploma in a plain black frame, hidden behind an old photo of me and Tracy as children, grinning with ice cream-stained faces. My life was built on small, intentional choices, each one designed to keep my world manageable and expectations low. I know, I told Robert quietly. It's just, family has always been complicated. I'm not sure I'm ready to be the center of attention, especially not now. You can't hide forever, Robert said, but there was kindness in it. If you wait too long, the story will be written for you. his words pressed on old wounds. Years ago, after my family brushed off my first big promotion, Tracy got a parade for her science trophy, and I got a "That's nice, dear." I learned that praise was rationed and uneven. It was around that time I decided to build something for myself, away from their measuring sticks. When Sterling Group came up for sale, I bought it through a trust, hiding my name in layers of legal paper. It was practical, but it also felt like a shield. As long as nobody knew, nobody could ask for handouts or accuse me of changing. I could succeed in secret, without the weight of their expectations, or their resentment. I glanced at the sideboard. A slim file folder sat tucked behind a stack of books, Sterling Group's original charter, records of every acquisition, board minutes with my initials in the margins. I sometimes wondered if my secrets made me safer or lonelier. Maybe both. Robert cleared his throat. Emily, the Westbrook deal is too big to lose. We'll handle the PR for now, but at some point, you'll have to step out of the shadows. Are you ready for that? I hesitated, twisting the hem of my dress. Ready? No. But I suppose that's never stopped me before. He chuckled, a sound of genuine warmth. That's the spirit. I'll forward the documents. Try to get some rest. When we hung up, I sat in the hush of my apartment, replaying the night in fragments, Tracy's easy laughter, Mom's searching eyes, the smell of sunburnt grass and charcoal. I thought of all the years I'd spent shrinking myself, convinced it was better to blend in than to risk standing out. Maybe that was true once, but now I wasn't so sure. Hiding hadn't kept me safe, it had only made me small. I got up and opened a drawer in my desk. Inside, carefully organized, were all the pieces of my secret life, copies of Sterling Group stock certificates, contracts with my signature, a business card with my alias, and the MBA diploma I'd earned while working 2 jobs and studying at night. Buried beneath it all were old photos, Tracy with her science trophy, me standing off to the side, holding a ribbon nobody mentioned. I set the photo aside, staring at my own reflection in the dark window. Could I step into the light without losing myself, or worse, losing the fragile balance I'd created? Would my family ever see me for who I really was, or would success just make me a stranger to them? A breeze rattled the blinds. In the silence, I heard my mother's voice from long ago, "If you ever do something big, we'll know." I almost smiled at the irony. Life is funny that way. Sometimes the secrets we keep are the only things holding us together, and the only things holding us back. For a long moment, I watched my shadow on the wall, caught between 2 worlds. Then, gathering my courage, I opened my laptop to work. Change might be coming, but tonight, the quiet was still mine. For as long as I can remember, my family has cast Tracy and me as opposites, she the golden child, I the overlooked one. Some stories stick, and ours was retold at every family gathering, whether I liked it or not. As the workweek began, I traded the humid chaos of the barbecue for the cool, measured pace of Sterling Group's headquarters, a world apart from picnic tables and the laughter of cousins. The building gleamed in the July sun, all glass and steel and tidy landscaping. I moved through the lobby unnoticed, dressed for anonymity, a navy blazer, hair pulled back, no name badge. Most people here knew me only by a different name, a deliberate choice I made when I took over. It allowed me to observe. Sometimes, I thought, the best way to lead was to listen without being seen. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the buzz of conversation punctuated by the tap of keyboards. Tracy's team was clustered near the break room, their voices carrying. Tracy stood in the center, gesturing animatedly as she recounted her latest victory, a marketing campaign that had brought in a new client. "Honestly, I don't know what the company would do without me," she joked, to a chorus of laughter. I paused a moment, watching the scene. Her confidence was effortless, a performance I had seen since childhood, at the science fair where she claimed my group project as her own, at holidays where every story seemed to revolve around her. In families, roles harden over time. Even here, where nobody knew our connection, the script hadn't changed. I ducked into a quiet corner office, one of many spaces I used to work in private. Logging in under my alias, I pulled up the company's dashboards. The numbers told a different story. Tracy's campaign had been solid, but not spectacular. Some key clients were lukewarm, and her team's turnover was higher than I liked. I made notes for later, my mind already mapping out solutions. The responsibility pressed on me, a familiar but heavy weight. A soft knock at the door. Robert Hayes, always punctual, appeared in the doorway. His tie was slightly askew, a rare lapse. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course," I said, motioning him in. He closed the door behind him, dropping his professional tone. "The board's eager about the upcoming merger. But there's a catch, they want to see more of you. In person." He lowered his voice, as if sharing a secret. "They're getting curious about the woman behind the curtain." I smiled ruefully. I thought that was the point. Anonymity, remember? Robert shook his head, a trace of sympathy in his eyes. "It was, but times are changing. You built something remarkable here. People want a leader they can see." He paused. "And there's talk, Emily. Rumors, questions. You can only hide so long." I leaned back, feeling the tension coil in my shoulders. "We'll figure it out. For now, let's focus on the numbers." After he left, I gathered my things and moved quietly through the corridors. In the main hallway, Tracy was walking toward me, arms full of color-coded folders, phone pressed to her ear. She barely glanced at me, just a nod, polite but impersonal. There was no flicker of recognition. She had no idea she was passing the CEO. It should have amused me, but instead it stung. Behind me, Tracy's laughter floated down the hall. "If only the CEO would let us be a little more creative. Some of her policies are just, I don't know, a bit old school." There was a pause, then another teammate piped up, "I heard she's barely around, maybe she doesn't care." I kept my face neutral as I listened. In truth, it was easier to be criticized when you were invisible. The strange comfort of anonymity is that it shields you from both praise and blame. But that day, the words pressed heavier than usual. I remembered high school, when Tracy had taken credit for my project and I'd said nothing, believing it would keep the peace. The habit of silence runs deep. In the break room, I watched as Tracy handed out cupcakes, her favorite bribe for hard weeks. "Don't worry, guys," she said, "I'll fight for us at the next meeting. Someone's got to shake things up." The team chuckled. I lingered at the doorway, suddenly unsure if I belonged anywhere at all. Leadership, I'd learned, wasn't about being liked, it was about doing what was right, even when nobody clapped. As I headed back to my office, my phone buzzed with a new message from Robert: "We can't wait much longer. The family barbecue may be the perfect moment." I stood there a long moment, staring at the screen. The thought of merging my two worlds, private and professional, hidden and seen, was dizzying. The sense of responsibility pressed down harder than ever. But maybe, just maybe, it was time. Some burdens, like some secrets, only grow heavier the longer you carry them. As I returned to my office, I caught my reflection in the glass, half shadow, half light, trying to balance both. At Sterling, the jokes and chatter faded as the workday wound down, leaving me alone with the numbers and my thoughts. A life built in the background is still a life, sometimes, it's just waiting for the right moment to step forward. Hiding in plain sight only works until someone starts looking for you. The thought gnawed at me in quiet moments, at the office, in my apartment, even in my parents' kitchen, reminding me that my carefully constructed balance was growing shakier by the day. It started at Sterling Group, in the glass-walled boardroom that overlooked the city. I sat at the long table, anonymous among executives who didn't realize the woman taking notes at the far end was the one signing their paychecks. Robert led the meeting, moving briskly through updates. But there was tension in the air, questions that circled, unspoken, about the upcoming merger and who was really steering the ship. When the meeting ended, Robert lingered. "Emily, a word?" His voice was low, urgent. The room emptied quickly, leaving just the two of us and the hum of the city beyond the windows. He closed his laptop. "I know you value your privacy, but we can't keep playing the shell game. People are getting suspicious. The merger's too big, rumors are swirling, and the board is restless. They want to see you. Not a name on a document, not an email. You." I looked out at the city lights. It was easier when nobody cared who was behind the scenes. Robert shook his head, a gentle smile softening his features. "You've built something real here. They want to know the person, not just the results. I think it's time." His words echoed in my head as I drove home that evening, traffic inching along Broad Street. At every red light, I checked my phone, half expecting another message about urgent board meetings, half dreading it. My apartment felt too small for my racing thoughts. I set down my bag and stared at the neatness, dishes in their place, laundry folded, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only noise. Usually, this order suited me. Tonight it felt like a reminder that control was slipping away. I turned on music, something old and familiar, the gentle croon of a favorite singer, and let it fill the room as I changed into sweats. My mind wouldn't settle, circling back to the day's events and Robert's warning. Then came the family text chain. "Mom, Emily, honey, can you help Tracy with her presentation next week? She's so busy, and you must have a little more free time." Tracy chimed in, "Thanks, Em. I know you're not as swamped." The implication was clear. I, the underemployed sister, surely had time to lend a hand. I bit back the urge to reply with the truth. Instead, I sent a simple thumbs up. Later, at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, Mom bustled around the kitchen, orchestrating the meal with practiced efficiency. "Emily, maybe you could set up Tracy's laptop for her," she asked. "You're so good with computers." She didn't notice the flicker of irritation in my face. Dad, already at the table, looked up from his newspaper. "Emily, you ever think about going back to school? Finding your lane, you know? There's more to life than floating along." I wanted to scream about the meetings, the contracts, the hundreds of decisions I made every week. Instead, I smiled and nodded, spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate. Sometimes peace means keeping certain truths to yourself. That night, after the house had gone quiet and I was back in my apartment, the merger news broke. Some overzealous analyst had caught wind and posted speculation online. Within hours, rumors swirled. Who was leading Sterling Group? Was the CEO a ghost? The story spread faster than I could contain it. In the early hours, Robert called. "This is bad, Emily. People are asking questions I can't answer. If you don't show up soon, publicly, the board will act. We can't afford to lose momentum, not now." His words landed heavy. "I hear you, Robert. I'll think about next steps." We hung up. My heart thudded in my chest. I stood by the window, watching the city's lights blink and fade, then slipped on a jacket and went out into the night. Walking helped, the rhythm of my steps giving shape to tangled thoughts. I wandered past the small park down the street, pausing by the duck pond, the air cool and damp against my skin. In moments like these, I remembered my mother's old saying, "If you ever did something important, we'd know." It had always been delivered with a loving smile, but now the words rang hollow. I'd done many important things. They just never saw them. Back home, I pulled out my journal and wrote without censoring, "What am I so afraid of? Why do I keep hiding?" Sometimes, we learn to disappear so well that we forget how to be seen. The anxiety didn't fade, but as I put down my pen and turned off the light, I felt the faintest stirrings of resolve. Maybe the time for hiding was over. Before bed, I read Robert's last message again, "If you're not visible soon, the board may step in." I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet hum of the city, and promised myself that when the time came, I'd choose my moment to step into the light. The thing about the truth is, it never really stays buried. It has a way of surfacing at the most inconvenient moments, rising through the cracks no matter how tightly you try to seal them. I learned that in grade school, when a single rumor turned a few awkward days into a season of silent lunches and sidelong glances. Maybe that's why, as an adult, I protected my privacy with the same caution as a skittish animal. At Sterling Group, the tension was more than background noise, it was a drumbeat I could feel in my bones. People whispered in hallways, glanced at closed office doors, speculated about leadership with increasing boldness. The news of the upcoming merger had set off a storm of questions about the company's direction and, inevitably, about the identity of the CEO who seemed to exist only in signed emails and the minutes of confidential meetings. In the break room, I passed a cluster of colleagues debating theories. "Maybe the CEO's some tech billionaire hiding out," one said, stirring cream into her coffee. "Or maybe she doesn't even exist," another joked, earning nervous laughter. I smiled to myself, thinking how ordinary I must look to them, a mid-level admin, quietly blending in, holding more power than they'd ever guess. Meanwhile, Tracy was at her desk, animatedly chatting with her team. "So, apparently, this new executive is going to change everything," she told them, eyes wide. "Nobody's met her. Not even Robert, and he's as high up as it gets." She was full of theories, none of them even close to the mark. I listened from the doorway, an unwilling audience to my own story told in reverse. Later that day, I stopped by my parents' house. The kitchen was warm and bright, the familiar smell of cinnamon and coffee in the air. Mom sat at the table, fussing over a pile of bills, while Dad read the local news. I could sense the undercurrent of worry even before Mom spoke. "Emily, honey, have you thought about your future lately?" she asked gently, not looking up from the stack of papers. "You know, Tracy's doing so well at her company. Maybe you could ask her about openings." Dad folded his newspaper. "It might be time to think about making a change, Em. There's nothing wrong with reaching higher." Their voices were kind, but the implication was clear. They still saw me as someone on the outside looking in. For a moment, I wanted to tell them everything. But I let the silence settle instead, listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock. In the evening, I met Robert at a quiet corner cafe. We sat in a booth by the window, the city lights making patterns on the table between us. Robert looked tired, but determined. "It's time, Emily," he said, leaning in. "The rumors are out of control. The board is anxious, the staff is restless, and you can't stay invisible forever." I nodded, feeling the weight of inevitability. "What do you suggest?" "Let's control the narrative. Make the reveal on your terms. You'll attend the company event, face the board, and," he hesitated, "there's also your family." You could use the upcoming barbecue as a soft introduction. If the people closest to you see the truth, maybe it'll be easier everywhere else. My stomach nodded at the thought. I imagined my mother's stunned silence, Dad's confusion, Tracy's disbelief. The idea of blending my worlds, public and private, work and family, felt overwhelming. Still, I knew Robert was right. Sometimes, change arrives whether you're ready or not. All right, I said quietly. The barbecue it is. We finished our coffees in a kind of truce, both understanding the scale of what was coming. As we parted, Robert squeezed my hand. You don't have to do this alone, Emily. Walking home, I made mental notes of what I'd need to prepare, board reports, an announcement, rehearsed answers for family questions. I found myself organizing my anxieties as if they were items on a checklist. That night, as I packed away leftovers from Mom's kitchen, Tracy called. She was bubbling with excitement. You'll never guess, I invited my boss to the barbecue. He said yes. Isn't that wild? Her voice was full of pride, certain that she'd impress everyone. I nearly dropped the container I was holding. Robert's coming? I managed. Yeah. Maybe you two can finally meet. He's such a great mentor. She laughed, unaware of the irony. After we hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen, heart thudding. Everything was converging, my family, my company, my secret. It felt like standing on a frozen pond, hearing the first warning cracks beneath your feet. The days leading up to the barbecue were filled with small, telling moments. Family group chats pinged with plans for side dishes and drink coolers. At work, colleagues traded rumors about the merger, while board members requested in-person meetings. I kept up appearances, answering emails, and double-checking every detail for the event ahead. At night, I lay awake, running through every scenario, what to say, how to act, what it would mean to finally be seen. I tried to find comfort in the familiar, in the rhythm of daily chores and the quiet acts of preparation. I ironed a dress I hadn't worn in years, sorted documents, made lists, and lost them again. And all the while, I felt the subtle tension tightening, a thread pulled taut between who I'd been and who I might become. If truth has its moment, I thought, it was coming soon. There's a taste to anticipation, sharp as the charge in the air before a summer storm. As the day of the Bennett family barbecue approached, I could almost feel electricity humming through the house. Every small sound, ice cubes rattling in a glass, the scrape of a folding chair on concrete, distant thunder threatening the horizon, seemed to echo with the knowledge that nothing would be quite the same after today. Dad always said, family first, business second. It was his mantra, a phrase I'd heard at every milestone, every argument, every Sunday dinner. But now, as I walked through the backyard, checking on the tables and the borrowed coolers packed with sodas, I wondered if those words still belonged to him, or if they had become my own quiet challenge. Linda, Mom, had taken charge of the preparations as if orchestrating a military campaign. She fluttered from the grill to the serving tables, her sharp eyes catching every crooked napkin and stray potato chip. Emily, can you check the condiments? Make sure we have enough ketchup, she called, not waiting for an answer before moving on to inspect the coleslaw. It was easier to keep moving than to pause and let nerves catch up. I appreciated the distraction. Tracy was a whirlwind, fussing over her outfit and rehearsing introductions in the mirror. He's not just my boss, you know, she told me, for the third time in an hour, Robert's a real power player. He's going to love meeting the family. She smoothed her blouse, adjusting the gold necklace that Mom had gifted her at last year's promotion party. I bit my tongue, holding back the truth that threatened to bubble over with every passing moment. The house filled with noise, cousins chasing each other down the hall, Aunt Susan handing out her lemon bars, Uncle Frank boasting about his new fishing rod. The scent of burgers grilling mixed with the sweet bite of fresh-cut grass, and the sun flashed off the backyard pool. All around me, I heard the gentle ribbing and offhand jokes about Emily's next big move, the way relatives do when they're sure nothing will ever change. "You're still at that little job, right?" a cousin asked, nudging me playfully. "When are you going to catch up to Tracy?" It was meant to be light, but it stung all the same. I smiled, taking the teasing in stride, though my mind was racing. Today, my secret was a living thing, pressing against my ribs, swelling with every laugh and careless word. I'd never felt so separate from the people who'd known me all my life. I moved through the party as if underwater, my face composed, my hands steady, even as my thoughts whirled. At the buffet table, I found myself lining up the serving spoons again and again, just to give my nervous energy somewhere to go. The sky was shifting overhead, clouds gathering at the edges of a blue afternoon. A breeze lifted, swirling the scent of charcoal and sunscreen. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Robert, arriving in 20. "Everything okay?" I ducked into the kitchen for a moment of quiet and called him back. His voice was calm, steady, a lifeline. "Just checking in, Emily. Are you ready?" I exhaled slowly, feeling my shoulders relax just a little. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Are you sure about this?" "You've got this." "They'll see what I see," he said, his tone warm but matter-of-fact. "I'll be there soon." I hung up, heart pounding, and returned to the crowd. My parents were arranging chairs in a loose circle, the kind they used every summer. Tracy flitted from group to group, trailing compliments and laughter. I watched her work the crowd, radiant and at ease. I felt a brief pang of envy. Tracy had always seemed to know her place, or at least how to claim it. I tried to anchor myself with details, the sticky feel of humidity on my skin, the sun glare on a half-empty glass of lemonade, the crackle of static as a distant radio changed stations. All around, the low hum of conversation drifted, punctuated by the sounds of children and the rhythmic thwack of a volleyball in the grass. It was familiar and strange all at once. The family's curiosity was dialed up, but they didn't yet know why. I caught snippets of gossip. "Who's Tracy bringing, really? Did you hear Emily's still at that office?" And forced myself to keep smiling. My secret felt enormous, and at times I wondered if they could see it written across my face. The driveway suddenly filled with the sound of tires crunching gravel. Heads turned. Through the window, I saw a sleek black car pull up to the curb, Robert's car, unmistakable. A hush fell over the backyard, a moment stretched taut with anticipation. "Is that him?" Mom whispered, straightening her skirt and smoothing her hair. Tracy all but leapt toward the door, her smile bright and expectant. I hovered by the entryway, pulse quickening, every sense on high alert. I could feel the electricity crackling now, inside and out. The air was thick with the scent of rain and new beginnings. In that instant, with everyone's eyes on the door, I understood how quickly the ground could shift beneath your feet. I straightened my dress, smoothed my hair, and reached for the doorknob. Everything was about to change, and for the first time I was almost ready. No one at the barbecue could have predicted the way the day would turn. The Bennett backyard was in full bloom, laughter ricocheting off the old maple, the air shimmering with the smell of grilled burgers and corn on the cob. The radio played a cheerful medley of classic hits, and for a moment, I almost let myself forget what was coming. But anticipation pulsed beneath my skin. I remembered a high school graduation long ago, standing in the stuffy gymnasium while Tracy crossed the stage twice, for a trophy that was half my work and a scholarship I'd quietly won, but which nobody mentioned. The applause had been thunderous for her, polite and brief for me. It was a memory that stung less with time, but never quite faded. Today, as I stood in the shade arranging lemonade cups, the old ache crept back. The barbecue was in full swing. Tracy was everywhere at once, her laughter rising above the clatter of cutlery and the delighted squeals of our younger cousins. Linda and Charles watched her like proud royalty, beaming at her every anecdote. "Tracy's boss is coming today," Mom announced to Aunt Susan and Uncle Frank, pride swelling in her voice. "You'll see, he's a very important man." She didn't mention me. I hovered at the edge, taking it all in. The cousins competed at cornhole, Uncle Frank recounted his fishing stories, and plates were heaped high with potato salad and ribs. From time to time, someone would lob a half-hearted question my way. "Still working at that little place, or ever think of moving to Chicago like Tracy?" The attention was fleeting, and I responded with practiced smiles and gentle deflections. It was easier to let them fill in the blanks. Then, the mood shifted. A sleek black car rolled slowly into the driveway, drawing every gaze. Tracy's eyes lit up, she all but bounced toward the door, smoothing her hair and straightening her blouse. "He's here." "That's Robert," she stage-whispered to a knot of relatives. Linda quickly marshaled the family to the patio, Charles standing tall at her side. "Smile, everyone," Mom called, as if the arrival of an important guest required us all to snap to attention. I could feel the pressure in the air change, as if a storm front had rolled in. Robert stepped out of the car, looking composed and entirely at ease in dark slacks and an open-collared shirt. Tracy met him at the gate, her enthusiasm on full display. "Robert, I'm so glad you made it. This is my family, everyone, this is my boss, Robert Hayes. He runs the show at Sterling Group." Polite introductions followed, Linda and Charles radiating pride, eager to show off Tracy's connections. I stood a little apart, catching Robert's eye. For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition, a private smile that only I could interpret. The questions started almost at once. Aunt Susan sidled up, wine glass in hand. "So, Robert, what's it like managing such a big company? Tracy's told us you're quite the visionary." Uncle Frank chimed in, "Any chance of getting some investment tips?" Tom, always quick with a joke, grinned. "Maybe Emily here could use a few pointers on climbing the corporate ladder, huh?" The laughter was good-natured but edged with the usual sting. Through it all, Robert's gaze kept finding mine, lingering just a bit longer than necessary. I could see a crease of concern in his brow, the careful way he measured his responses. Every so often, a cousin or aunt would glance from him to me, curiosity flickering as if they sensed something amiss. The patio, usually noisy with chatter, began to quiet. Even the youngest cousins seemed to pick up on the tension, their games slowing as the grown-ups' attention focused on the guest of honor. Robert finished a brief conversation with Linda and stepped forward, glass raised for a toast. "I have to say, it's a pleasure to be here today," he began, his voice carrying. "Tracy is a wonderful asset to our company, and it's clear where she gets her warmth and energy. But I'd also like to acknowledge someone else, someone whose impact on Sterling Group has been extraordinary." He turned toward me, his gaze direct and respectful. "Mrs. Bennett, thank you for everything you've done for us. Your leadership has set a new standard for our organization." A hush fell over the patio. Linda's smile wavered, Charles's hand tightened on his chair. Tracy looked utterly confused. The sound of clinking glasses stilled, the sizzle of the grill faded into the background. It was as if the world paused to let Robert's words settle. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, from somewhere near the back, Aunt Susan's voice rang out, sharp with disbelief. "Wait, what did he just say?" All eyes turned to me. The weight of their curiosity was a physical thing, heavy and relentless. My heart pounded as I met their gaze, feeling the moment crack open beneath my feet. In that suspended silence, every story, every secret, every slight and every hope hovered, waiting for what would come next. Some secrets are simply too big to keep, and mine finally broke free for everyone to see. In the frozen hush after Robert's words, I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. The scent of barbecue hung in the air, heavy and sweet, but nobody seemed hungry now. All eyes, every cousin, aunt, uncle, my own parents, were trained on me, waiting for a punchline that never came. For a moment, I was back at college, reliving that first autumn when being myself had felt so easy. Far from home, I'd slipped out of old expectations, breathing in the freedom of campus life. I'd made friends who knew me for my ideas, not my family ties, and found a place where I could just belong. Standing there in my parents' backyard, under a sky just beginning to haze with summer twilight, I ached for that feeling of ease. Robert didn't let the silence stretch for long. He smiled, warmly, respectfully, and said, "Emily has been the guiding force behind Sterling Group's success. Her leadership is the reason we've achieved so much in recent years." A low murmur rippled through the patio. Tracy stared at me as if I'd sprouted wings. "Wait, what are you talking about?" she managed, voice trembling. I swallowed, steadying myself. "It's true, Tracy. I own Sterling Group. I've been running things behind the scenes for a few years now." Linda's hand went limp, her plate slipped and shattered against the pavers. Charles stood abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping loud against the deck. "Emily, what on earth is going on? Are you joking?" His face flushed with confusion and something like anger. I met his gaze with as much calm as I could muster. "I kept my work private, Dad. I needed space to succeed on my own terms, without the pressure or the expectations." Aunt Susan's mouth hung open. "But you're so quiet. I thought you were just ordinary?" I finished gently, offering a small, sad smile. "I like a simple life." That's never meant I wasn't working or dreaming big. The spell of disbelief broke at once. Some relatives rushed forward, voices raised in congratulations. Uncle Frank patted me on the back, beaming. "Didn't know we had a tycoon in the family." Cousins snapped phone pictures. But others, especially Tracy, looked like they'd been punched. Tom blinked at me, stunned, then shot Tracy a helpless glance. Tracy was trembling, her cheeks pale. You lied to us?" Tears pricked her eyes, voice rising. "All these years, you watched us struggle and you said nothing?" Her words cut deeper than any of the old jokes. "It was never about revenge," I said quietly. "I needed to know I could do it myself. And honestly, I was scared you wouldn't accept it, you'd want things from me, or think less of me, or..." I trailed off, unable to find the right words. Linda finally spoke, her voice paper thin. "Emily, why would you hide this from your own family?" I hesitated, searching their faces. Because for a long time I wasn't sure what would hurt more, keeping it to myself, or sharing it and feeling like a stranger in my own home. The patio was alive with whispers now, some supportive, some skeptical. I saw Uncle Frank leaning in, sharing theories, Aunt Susan muttering with Mom, cousins texting under the table. I felt their scrutiny, the hunger for details, the way their eyes flicked to my shoes, my dress, as if searching for clues they'd missed. Tracy stared at me, wounded. "So, what now? Are you just going to act like nothing happened? Like you're not different?" I took a breath. "I'm still your sister. I still care about all of you. This changes nothing about who I am." But of course, everything had changed. The family's body language was a blur of confusion, Linda clutching a napkin in one hand, Charles pacing the edge of the patio, Tracy frozen, her face wet with tears. The energy in the yard was nervous, volatile. I felt exposed, my old safety nets gone. Through the commotion, Robert moved to my side, lending a subtle support just by standing near. "If anyone has questions about the business, I'm happy to answer," he said, diplomatic and steady. "But let's remember this is a family gathering." It was an olive branch, but the damage had been done. The old hierarchies, Tracy the star, Emily the afterthought, had dissolved in the space of a few sentences, leaving something raw and uncertain in their place. In that moment, I thought again of my time away at college, when life had felt simple and I had belonged. Now, as Tracy's hurt gaze locked with mine and the rest of the family shifted and murmured, I wondered if belonging was always as fragile as a secret, one that, once told, could never be taken back. When the truth comes out, you finally learn who's really in your corner. After the shattering silence of the reveal, the Bennett family barbecue quickly unraveled. The grill hissed, the music faded, and a heavy hush settled over the backyard, broken only by low voices and the clink of abandoned glasses. I watched as the world I'd known was rearranged in real time, alliances shifting, old roles collapsing like a house of cards. Inside, Mom moved with unfamiliar urgency. She cleared plates that didn't need clearing, wiped at invisible crumbs, her composure stretched thin. She darted glances at me, as if trying to memorize a new version of her daughter. "Emily, sweetheart, do you need anything? Should I get you some iced tea? Or maybe, do you want help with your work? I could come by and organize your files," she offered, her voice wavering between pride and anxiety. Dad was less gracious, his hands clenching the back of a dining chair. "Why would you keep something like this from us, Emily? Why hide? Didn't you trust your own family?" The accusation hung in the air, thickening the tension. I thought of all the times they'd waved off my victories, the way my efforts were met with "that's nice, dear," or a quick change of subject. "It wasn't about trust, Dad," I said quietly, "not exactly. It was about needing space, from the expectations, the judgment, the constant measuring. I wanted to build something that was mine, without having to prove anything to anyone." Linda's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed a napkin to her mouth. I wish you'd let us be there for you. I feel like I missed everything." I reached for her hand, uncertain. Sometimes, I needed to be alone. It was the only way I could breathe. From the living room, voices rose in a confused symphony. Aunt Susan and Uncle Frank offered congratulations, not missing a beat as they hinted at business ideas or joked about having an executive in the family now. Cousins asked for internships, one even nudging me about sponsoring her startup. The sudden interest was dizzying, so different from the usual polite indifference. Robert kept his distance, standing by the window, his presence a silent reassurance. He caught my eye, nodded, and let me handle the family on my own terms. I was grateful for the respect. But the harshest reaction came from Tracy. She paced the hallway, arms folded tight, face flushed. "You betrayed me," she spat, her voice brittle. "You watched me work my tail off, thinking I was finally getting somewhere, and the whole time, you were just, what? Laughing at me?" I shook my head, struggling for words. "Tracy, I never laughed at you. I wanted you to succeed. I wanted all of us to be happy. But I knew if I told you the truth, it would change everything between us, and I was afraid it would ruin the only relationship we had left." She glared, eyes glassy with tears. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, Tom following in her wake. "This isn't over, Emily. Tracy called over her shoulder, voice echoing through the house. The tension lingered long after she left. Relatives offered awkward hugs, platitudes, and promises to keep in touch. I smiled through it all, feeling both proud and strangely hollow. Later, as dusk settled in, I slipped away to the quiet of my car. The leather seat still warm from the sun, I closed the door and let out a shaky breath. Through the windshield, I saw my family inside, some still clustered in groups, others casting uncertain looks toward the door, as if expecting me to return and resume the old script. Instead, I let my head fall back against the headrest. Relief flooded me. At last, the secret was out, the pretense over. But there was sorrow too, a heaviness for what had been lost in the process. I remembered all the years I'd spent trying to be enough, to fit into a shape that never suited me. Even as pride simmered beneath the pain, I wondered if I would ever truly belong, now that the truth had redrawn the boundaries. As I started the engine, Robert knocked gently at my window. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "I think so," I managed. "It's strange, though. I thought telling the truth would make everything easier. But maybe it just makes things real." He smiled gently. "Real is better than perfect, Emily. You did the right thing." I nodded, blinking back tears. For the first time in years, I felt entirely myself, raw, uncertain, but honest. The road ahead looked lonely, but I was done hiding. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a last glimpse of my family silhouetted in the windows, their world changed as much as mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to turn back. Sometimes, telling the truth is just the beginning, the real drama follows after. The days since the barbecue had blurred into a haze of awkward conversations, work deadlines, and a strange, unsteady freedom. If I thought the shock would fade quickly, I was wrong. My phone buzzed constantly with texts, emails, and a new crop of voicemails, some supportive, some angry, most tinged with a confusion that mirrored my own. I remembered something an old mentor once told me: "You don't owe anyone an explanation for your happiness." At the time, it felt bold, almost selfish. Now, I clung to those words like a lifeline as my world rearranged itself, inside and out. At the office, things turned from tense to uncomfortable. Tracy filed a formal complaint with HR, alleging nepotism and unfair treatment. She claimed my leadership was biased, that her recent transfer was a personal vendetta. The irony, of course, was that she still didn't grasp the difference between accountability and favoritism. Sterling Group's HR launched an investigation, protocol, I reminded myself, not punishment. I recused myself entirely, determined to let the process run without interference, even as Tracy's resentment simmered in every message she sent. "You're ruining my life," one text read. "If you cared at all, you'd step in and make this right." Each ping was a reminder of how deep the hurt ran. Linda appeared at my apartment the next evening, arms laden with Tupperware full of chicken pot pie and cornbread. She hovered by the stove, wringing her hands, uncertain how to start. "I just thought you might not have had a real meal," she said, her voice soft. "Maybe we could talk?" We sat at my small kitchen table, the food between us. She glanced around, as if searching for the child she remembered in the grown woman before her. "I wish I'd seen you sooner," she admitted. "I wish I'd listened better." I smiled gently. "It's not all your fault, Mom." I kept my distance too. She squeezed my hand, eyes brimming. "Families, we try our best, but sometimes we get it wrong." We didn't say much more, but the silence was kinder than before. The next day, Dad arrived unannounced at my office, clutching a handful of newspaper clippings. "Look at this, Em, your company made the business section." His tone was awkward, a little proud, a little bewildered. Your old man can't keep up with all the changes, but, well, that's my girl. For all his bluster, I knew he was trying in the only way he knew how. Meanwhile, the fallout at Sterling continued. Robert met me in my office, offering a reassuring nod. The board is behind you, he said. You've proven yourself, Emily. Let the process play out. Whatever happens with Tracy, you're not alone in this. HR's findings came sooner than expected. They uncovered that Tracy had misrepresented her achievements and taken credit for her team's work, issues that had festered long before my secret came out. The investigation left no room for favoritism. I was forced to confront an impossible choice: step in and protect Tracy, risking my integrity and the company's trust, or let the chips fall where they may. I agonized over the decision. Late at night, I scrolled through our old family texts, rereading the years of strained messages, Linda's cheerful check-ins, Dad's news articles, Tracy's once playful jabs turning brittle and sharp. The distance between us now was measured in silences and unsent replies. A new voicemail from Tracy arrived, her voice raw. You think you're so perfect now? I hope you're happy, Emily. You have everything, and I have nothing. She hung up before I could answer. In the end, I chose to let the process work. I couldn't save Tracy from consequences she'd brought on herself. If I stepped in, I'd betray not only my colleagues but myself. I sent her a single text: I love you, Tracy. I hope someday you'll understand. The official report landed the next morning. Tracy was offered the choice to resign quietly or face formal termination. She chose to resign, leaving behind a trail of angry messages and a family splintered by too much truth. Yet, in the strange quiet that followed, I felt my confidence grow. I no longer shrank from my reflection in the office windows. I met people's eyes in meetings, unafraid. The shame I'd carried for so long had loosened its grip. The gulf between my family and me was still wide, but in that space, I found a kind of peace. I understood now that honesty and belonging weren't always the same, and that self-respect sometimes meant standing alone. As I left work that evening, the city lights blinked on, bright and unapologetic. I walked home, thinking of my mentor's advice. I owed no one an apology for who I'd become, not even the people I loved most. For the first time in my life, I was learning to set boundaries, not just at work, but at home. The lesson wasn't easy, and it didn't come with applause or even much understanding. But as the days passed since Tracy's resignation, I realized that some things had to break before they could mend. My therapist's words echoed in my mind: you can't control their reactions, only your own choices. I'd clung to that advice through sleepless nights and long, silent mornings. It became my quiet mantra, especially now as I faced both my family and my company with a new resolve. At Sterling Group, the fallout from the HR investigation was still rippling. Tracy met with HR behind closed doors, the meeting tense but professional. When it was over, she found me in my office. Her eyes were red, but her posture was proud, defiant as ever. They gave me two options, she said, voice flat. Quit with a recommendation, or let them fire me and ruin my career. I nodded, meeting her gaze. I wrote you a good reference, Tracy. Not because you're my sister, but because you did good work, when you let yourself. I hope it helps, wherever you go next. She stared at the floor, hands balled into fists. Don't do me any favors, Emily. It's not a favor. It's a courtesy. And it's my last one for a while, I replied softly. Linda called later that evening, voice tight with worry. Isn't there anything you can do, Emily? Tracy's devastated. She made mistakes, yes, but she's your sister. Family forgives, you know? I let the silence grow, refusing the old roles. Family forgives, Mom, but family also learns. I can't protect Tracy from consequences she brought on herself. She sighed, sensing she wasn't going to win this argument. I just wish things could go back to how they were. I closed my eyes, picturing all the years I'd twisted myself to win their approval. So do I, sometimes. But maybe it's time for something different. At work, my world shifted. I moved into a new office on the top floor, a space filled with light. On the wall, I hung a framed group photo from our last team charity event, smiling faces, laughter, belonging. For the first time, my desk was free of old family pictures. I realized I didn't need them as proof of who I was, or who I belonged to. The emails and texts from Tracy slowed to a trickle, then stopped. Her final message was short, bittersweet. I hope someday you'll understand. I don't know who you are anymore. I read it twice, feeling the ache of endings, but also the relief of new beginnings. That evening, as dusk turned the sky violet, I sat in my living room with a box of old photos. There was one, a family portrait from when I was a teenager. Tracy was in front, beaming, while I hovered at the edge, half smiling, almost invisible. For years I'd kept it out of loyalty, or maybe habit. Now, with careful hands, I tore the photo in two. The gesture felt final, but not cruel. It was a way of letting go of the girl who'd always waited for permission to take up space. I replaced the picture on my mantle with a snapshot from the office party, me laughing, arm in arm with colleagues, fully present and unafraid. As I closed the box, I felt a quiet pride settling in. I had chosen myself, not at the expense of others, but in recognition that my needs mattered too. I didn't need to be everything for everyone, or to explain away my happiness. Robert stopped by to check in before leaving for the night. He lingered at the door, smiling. "The board's excited about your new direction," he said. "But more importantly, how are you?" I smiled back, the answer simple for the first time. "I'm good, Robert. For the first time, I really am." The past still tugged at me, but its hold was weaker. I was no longer living in the shadow of old expectations. Instead, I was building something new, on my own terms. Before bed, I looked around my apartment, neater, brighter, different. On my desk, my journal lay open. I wrote a single line: "You get to choose what you keep, and what you leave behind." The day I stopped hiding was the day I finally felt at home in my own life. It didn't happen all at once, but looking back now, I can see how each choice, each boundary, each small act of courage brought me to this moment. It was spring 2024, and the world outside had woken up in full color: daffodils by the Sterling Group's front steps, sunlight glinting off the glass entryway, the promise of fresh starts everywhere I looked. Inside, the annual charity gala was in full swing. Tables draped in white, vases of bright tulips, the steady hum of laughter and conversation as colleagues mingled with community partners. I moved through the crowd, greeting old friends and new faces, feeling both nervous and deeply, quietly proud. A year ago, I would have stayed on the sidelines, watching the room and counting the minutes until I could go home. But tonight, I belonged here. I was no longer a secret, no longer shrinking to fit someone else's idea of me. My team, my new family, in many ways, raised their glasses in a quiet toast as I passed. Robert flashed me a reassuring grin from across the room. As the program began, I took the stage for a short speech. The lights were warm, the audience attentive, and for a heartbeat, I remembered my childhood wish: maybe someday, they'll see me as I am. That little girl was still a part of me, but she wasn't running the show anymore. I cleared my throat, heart steady. I used to think I had to choose between being myself and being accepted, I said, letting my gaze rest on the faces in the crowd. But I've learned that the bravest thing we can do is show up as ourselves, even if it's scary, even if it means some people need time to understand. Tonight, I invite you to be bold, be kind, and most of all, be yourself. You never know who you'll inspire, just by living your own truth. The applause that followed was genuine, full of warmth, not just for the company's achievements but for the journey behind them. When I stepped off stage, Linda and Charles were waiting. Mom hugged me tightly, eyes shining, still a little tentative but filled with pride. "I'm proud of you, Emily." "I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." Dad gave me a gruff nod, squeezing my shoulder. "You did good, kid." Their approval meant something, but it didn't define me. I'd found my worth on my own terms. Tracy wasn't there, her absence both sharp and expected. But as I checked my phone later that night, a new message appeared, a simple text from her, "Maybe we can talk soon." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. I sent back a gentle reply, "I'd like that, Tracy. I'm here when you're ready." Later, as the crowd drifted home and the last of the flowers were gathered, I lingered in the quiet of the empty ballroom. Robert joined me, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said, "I think you've built something even bigger than a company here." I smiled, letting his words sink in. For a long time, I thought being seen would make me feel small. Now, I just feel free. At the end of the night, I drove past my parents' house, the porch light still on. I didn't stop, but I didn't need to. I felt their love from a distance, and I knew we'd find our way back to each other, step by step. Back at home, I curled up in my favorite chair, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a life finally lived out loud, team photos, thank you cards from staff, even a framed copy of my first big contract. No longer did I feel split in two. I was whole. Spring breezes drifted in through the open window, carrying the laughter and music from the gala just a few blocks away. For the first time, I let myself hope that the future would be gentle, that forgiveness was possible, that my family, old and new, would meet me where I was. Maybe that's all any of us really want, to be known, to be loved, to be seen, and to belong. Tonight, I knew I was finally, quietly, gloriously myself. Looking back, I realized the day I stopped hiding was the day I finally found peace in my own story. Life has taught me that sometimes, true belonging comes not from trying to please others, but from daring to be ourselves, with all our strengths, flaws, and quiet hopes. Family bonds can be tested and even stretched thin, but when we choose compassion and honesty, love always finds a way home. If this story touched you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts or your own experiences. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. May we all find the courage to live as our true selves, surrounded by those who care.